This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. Russian President Vladimir Putin holds his annual end-of-year press conference amid tensions over Ukraine. Shortages of water, food and fuel hit central regions of typhoon-ravaged Philippines. And Libyans react to postponement of presidential elections. Russian President Vladimir Putin is holding his annual end-of-year press conference where he's addressing regional and international issues via questions from hundreds of local and international journalists. Let's listen in. The traditional in-person format returns this year after holding the 2020 event virtually due to the pandemic. About 500 journalists are attending. Tensions over Ukraine are expected to be brought up during the marathon event. The press conference is also set to see questions on COVID-19 as well as an unprecedented crackdown on opposition the Kremlin has deemed critical of its tightening grip on power.
And a couple of words about the history. You speak often about history, you remember history well, and you will probably remember that every time when in Russia, when authority was concentrated in the power in the hands of one force, and when Russia was in the stage of acute confrontation with the West, then it brought about a reaction, a plunge in the country into revolution and wars. So don't you think that having all the power in the country, you are laying the groundwork for such revolutions and wars? Yes, thank you. Speaking about history, I would like to remind you of what our opponents have been saying over many centuries. Russia cannot be defeated. Russia can only be disintegrated from inside the country, something which was achieved successfully during the First World War, or to be more precise, after the war, as an outcome of that. And then it happened in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed. But who did that? Those who were servicing the interests of other countries, interests that are not the same as the interests of the Russian people and the citizens of Russia. You spoke about that person whom were allegedly poisoned. We sent many letters from the Prosecutor General's office asking for any evidence to corroborate his claims. Not a single evidence, not a single piece of evidence was provided. So what does it tell us? Not a single piece of evidence was given to us. You know, about this Novichok. Well, we suggested that our experts go there, work with our counterparts. I made this proposal personally to the Chancellor of Germany, to the President of France. I asked them to provide us with a chance to send our experts, give us something to bring criminal charges. But no, not a single piece of evidence was given to us. Only silence on the other side.
About 500 journalists are attending the annual end-of-year press conference. The tensions over Ukraine are expected to be brought up during the marathon event. The press conference is also set to see questions on COVID-19 as well as an unprecedented crackdown on opposition the Kremlin has deemed critical of its tightening grip on power. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang have met with Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam during Lam's duty visit in Beijing for her annual administrative report. Zhang Dan has the story.
After listening to Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam's briefing on Wednesday afternoon, Chinese President Xi Jinping fully recognized and strongly endorsed the work of Lam and the SAR government. She said stability has been restored in Hong Kong and the regional economy is recovering. COVID restrictions and the national security law have been having positive effects. President Xi also spoke highly of last week's Legislative Council election. It was the first in Hong Kong held under the improved electoral system. She said the election manifested the governance of patriots and secured the democratic rights of Hong Kong residents. Premier Li Keqiang also listened to Lam's report on the administrative work in Hong Kong. Li said the central government would continue to fully and faithfully implement the principles of one country, two systems, Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong, and to permit a high degree of autonomy. Chief Executive Carrie Lam briefed reporters on her mission.
The duty trip to the capital is to brief the Chinese president and premier on development. They have shared with me their thoughts on the direction and plan for the nation's development to help bridge the region into the national development plan. This is the purpose of the duty trip to Beijing. I think this has been accomplished on my trip this year, and it meets the demand for the job as chief executive. It's my 5th and last duty trip, but I will continue to serve my role and be very serious about the role I serve.
Lam also said 2021 was a tough but significant year for Hong Kong. She thanked the central government for supporting Hong Kong to fight against the pandemic and expressed expectations for the resumption of custom clearance between the Chinese mainland and the SAR. Looking ahead, Lam projected great improvements to the livelihood of Hong Kong people and the region's development. Zhang Dan, CGTN.
President Xi has also met with Macau Special Administrative Region Chief Executive Ho Lat-seng, who also came to Beijing to give his administrative report. President Xi said Macau has maintained a stable development and effective pandemic control. He says Macau's economy has gradually recovered and the city has supported small businesses. The president also said the legal system has been improved. Central authorities vow to keep firmly implementing the one country, two systems policy and promoting Macau's economic development. The World Health Organization's European chief says Omicron will become the dominant coronavirus variant in Europe by the start of 2022. Britain has reported more than 100,000 new daily cases for the first time, with the Omicron variant driving the country's surge of infections in the last 7 days. France has seen a higher number of confirmed cases weekly since the pandemic began. It has started vaccinating children aged 5 to 11. Germany has ordered 80 million vaccine doses from BioNTech, and it's urging citizens to get the 4th booster shot. Ryan Thompson has more from Paris.
This is one of the most significant developments in the vaccine rollout scheme across Europe that we've seen in a couple of weeks. Germany's new health minister is jumping the gun, saying that a 4th jab will absolutely be necessary in order to really combat these Omicron cases that we're seeing more and more of. Germany has ordered 80 million versions of a Pfizer-BioNTech jab that is specifically targeted towards the Omicron variant and really trying to master some of the differences in terms of this variant of the virus. Those jabs should be delivered by April or May at the latest, but it really comes as the World Health Organization continues its call for Western countries and rich countries to slow down their booster campaigns and share the jabs with the rest of the world. Their message continues to be that this is just not the way out of the pandemic. This is the way out of the pandemic for certain parts of the world, but it needs to be a global effort. These blanket booster programs will actually prolong the pandemic, not end it. Those being the words of the WHO chief. Take a listen.
SAGE concluded that the focus of immunization must remain on decreasing deaths and severe disease, and expressed concern that blanket booster programs will exacerbate vaccine inequity. About 20% of all vaccine doses administered every day are currently being given as boosters or additional doses.
At least one person is dead and around 80 reported missing in a landslide at a jade mine in northern Myanmar. Wednesday's landslide happened in the Hipakant area of Kachin State, sweeping workers into a lake. Rescue operations are underway. Most of the victims are believed to be illegal jade miners. Authorities say many of the missing have very little chance of survival. Authorities in the Philippines are continuing humanitarian relief operations in areas devastated by Typhoon Rai. Several regions have been placed under a state of calamity, a move aimed at speeding up relief and rehabilitation efforts. China has offered $1 million in cash and nearly 5,000 tons of rice as assistance. The superstorm battered the country last week, affecting more than 1.8 million people and killing nearly 400. A witness says many places are barely recognizable.
I was devastated when I first saw the aftermath. Surigao is barely recognizable at the moment. It's heartbreaking. But at the same time, seeing the destruction also made me mad, because it made me realize that we've become the victims of the climate crisis that most people tried to ignore. The supplies here are dwindling, so people are literally fighting for resources such as food, water, and gasoline. In fact, other people are so desperate to the point that there have been multiple cases of looting commercial areas.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. We leave you now with a view of two shipwrecks discovered off the Mediterranean coast. Israeli archaeologists found them near the ancient city of Caesarea, dating back to some 1700 to 600 years ago.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
The little tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just
That's
came
a tear
in.
gas. So it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
within clear
line.
view of this front line position.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libyans react to postponement of presidential elections. Nigeria's COVID-19 cases spike again as the country enters a fourth COVID-19 wave. And Omicron dashes hopes of Zimbabweans looking to return home for Christmas. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program, public outcry in Zimbabwe over a proposed tax on smartphones. And Real Madrid claim a 2-1 win over Bilbao despite COVID-related absences. Libya's election board has suggested January the 24th as a new date for the first round of voting in the nation's presidential polls. The statement came after a parliamentary committee tasked with overseeing the exercise said it was impossible to have the vote on Friday, as was originally scheduled. Earlier this week, the Electoral Commission dissolved all its committees nationwide without naming its final list of candidates.
Libya's election, intended to coincide with parliamentary polls, was part of a United Nations-led peace process. However, lawmakers said on Wednesday that after consultations, they deemed it impossible to hold the exercise on the set date. The House of Representatives says it will convene on December 27th to discuss the situation.
When the House of Representatives saw that the 24th will be a normal day and will not hold any electoral process, they made a communication parliamentary committee, especially after the work of the Elections Commission stopped. And the communication parliamentary committee contacted the Elections Commission and received a report from it, and this report will be discussed in the next session, which will be on the next 27th. Through this session, it will be decided, after considering the report, as well as what obstacles the Elections Commission had faced, especially the force majeure, and the extent of the Parliament's abilities to solve them in line with the date proposed by the Commission, or perhaps the matter may need to choose another date. A new date beyond January the 24th may need to be approved by Parliament.
Speculations of a delay had been mounting for weeks leading up to the election. The vote faced challenges, including disputes over election laws and the eligibility of candidates. Libyans have reacted to the latest developments, with some stating that tensions may rise over the looming uncertainty.
Everyone was waiting for these elections to save Libya. We want a president elected by the people to govern Libya, who would be recognized by all states in the world in order to get us out of this crisis.
We hope that the war won't return. War brings nothing but destruction, ruin and displacement, so we hope that it won't return.
All Libyans are disappointed. There had been excitement that on December 24th we would get a new kind of person to save the country and give us something of themselves. And we were happy about the elections. We wanted them on December 24th. Now they have been postponed. There is a big problem.
Libya has been experiencing relative calm since a ceasefire deal arrived at in October last year, following a year-long offensive by Eastern-based commander Khalifa Haftar. However, with the latest developments, the potential of a bigger fallout remains ever present. Chamrono, CGTN.
Amira El Sayed, a political analyst and editor at the Egyptian Gazette, is joining us now from Cairo with more on that development. Amira, will the proposed one-month postponement of Libyan elections, though, address the unresolved issues?
Look now, postponing the political elections in Libya was highly expected in light of the recent developments that has further complicated the political situations in Libya. So now uncertainty is still facing the political situation in Libya, and many questions remain unanswered, especially that even the preparations for the electoral process have been taking place in a highly polarized climate. So now the Libyan authorities have a real responsibility to ensure a free, fair and inclusive elections. One of the key challenges facing now the Libyan authorities is to announce the final list of the candidates, especially that there are some controversial candidates like Saif al-Qaddafi, who is wanted for human rights abuses, and also Haftar, and also Dabibia, who pledged that he will not run for the election, and now he is running for the elections. So settling or ending the political and legal problem that hamper the elections is the key challenge now that should be tackled within only 1 month.
Right. Amira, it's been a back and forth over the Libyan political situation, since 2011. Has the international community let Libya down, though?
Actually, the international community bears a huge responsibility, and that's why they expressed their concerns over postponing the elections. For example, the U.S. ambassador to Libya, Norland, he said that working toward the elections should be given a top priority, and the authorities concerned should work on settling any problems that hamper the elections. We have also seen that the French government also stressed that it is committed to ensuring the smooth running of elections, and also the German government also stressed the paramount importance of committing to the political roadmap set by the UN. However, in light of the recent polarized climate in Libya, I think that the international community will impose certain sanctions in the upcoming period, because 24th of January is the last chance to reach a political solution in Libya, and this is what mentioned by the U.S. ambassador, who hinted at some sanctions not only by the U.S. but also by the international community against those who commit violence or will hamper the election. So we will see more strict steps by the international community in the upcoming period, because they are pinning hopes that these elections will mark an end to the long-running disputes and conflicts in Libya that have led to proliferation of militias and human rights abuses.
All right. So, there have been some strict processes that have been put in place, but the electoral process has, however, been characterized by a highly polarized climate. What will help diffuse tensions in Libya and allow for a peaceful transition?
First, there should be collective actions towards ensuring this peaceful transitional process between the Libyan authorities and the international community. On the one hand, the international community should agree on and end any legal or political problem that hamper the elections. For example, all issues related to the candidate eligibility should be tackled, and there should be clear legislative framework for the elections. Also, after the election, there should be more strict steps to ensure that all political parties will accept the results of the election, because maybe in light of the current polarization in Libya, maybe the losing parties will rally, for example, armed groups in order to challenge the outcome. So the international community efforts go in tandem with the political and legislative role of the Libyan authorities in order to ensure free, fair and inclusive elections in Libya.
All right. Amira El Sayed joining us there from Cairo. Thank you. Nigeria has destroyed over 1 million doses of outdated COVID-19 vaccines. The AstraZeneca batches expired since November. Authorities say they were donated by some international donors just a month before their expiration. Authorities now say they will no longer accept donated COVID-19 vaccines with a short shelf life. The West African country plans to vaccinate 55 million of its 206 million citizens before February 2022. Only 2% of Nigerians have received their 2 doses so far. Well, CGTN's Deji Bademosi is joining us live from Lagos. Deji, what is driving the current spike in COVID-19 cases in the country?
Well, Beatrice, according to the authorities, the increasing rate of COVID-19 infection is attributed to the increase in the Delta, increase now in infection rates of the Delta variant as well as the Omicron variant. What they are not telling us is the number of infection the country is actually witnessing with the Omicron variant. But apart from that, there's also the fact that people are not observing the COVID-19 protocols, and those who are traveling and coming into the country are also not observing the COVID-19 protocols. As a matter of fact, some of them are not quarantining, as provided by the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19. So there are quite a lot of factors, a combination of them as a matter of fact. But then I have some details in this next report. For the first time in 11 months, Nigeria has reported more than 2,000 COVID-19 infections in one single day. It's a clear evidence of the rapidly rising rate of infections in the past weeks in the country. Health authorities have confirmed that the country has now entered the fourth wave of the pandemic. Nigeria only recorded its first case of the Omicron variant earlier this month, and since then, the infection rate has risen sharply. But it's still unclear how many cases of the Omicron variant have been detected in the country so far.
Now, we do know that this virus is getting stronger. It is developing mutations all the time, and these mutations are there to equip it, to make sure that it as a virus is able to infect more and more people.
Nigeria is currently battling vaccine hesitancy, with many in the country still refusing to take the jab due to fear and misinformation. Meanwhile, health authorities have now destroyed over 1 million expired doses of the COVID-19 vaccines received earlier this year. The government says the vaccines expired before they could be used because of their short shelf life.
We have successfully withdrawn about 1,066,214 doses of expired AstraZeneca vaccines. We have come through in our promise to all Nigerians to be transparent in our delivery of vaccines. These vaccines did not expire before we took the decision to withdraw them.
The World Health Organization has issued a global warning over the new variant. It says Omicron is spreading faster than the Delta variant. Nigeria's top health agency has also issued a warning, urging people in the country to take collective responsibility to reduce the transmission of the virus. The authorities, though, have ruled out imposing any form of lockdown, saying the country will just have to live with the virus while increasing vaccinations. DG Badimosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, Deji, only about 2% of Nigerians are now fully vaccinated. How is the vaccine uptake in the country?
Well, it's improved marginally, Beatrice, but it's still quite low. Just as you said, just under 2% have been fully vaccinated, just around 2% now have been fully vaccinated. When you add that to the 2.2% that have been partly vaccinated, altogether you have just around 4.2%. If you also consider the fact that the country plans to vaccinate around 70% of the population by next year, then you know the country is definitely far off target. The problem is that vaccine hesitancy is still there. What the authorities are doing is to use traditional rulers and use various means now to enlighten people about the need to take the vaccine. So there's been a marginal uptake now, but it's still very low. That vaccine hesitancy is still a problem. And as a matter of fact, authorities say it's also partly the reason why we're having this increasing infection rate in the country, that people are actually not coming up forward as you would expect now to take the vaccine. So obviously it's a challenge, but there's been a slight improvement, but it can definitely get better.
Deji Badimosi joining us there from Lagos. Thank you. At least 8 people have been killed by gunmen in Nigeria's northwest states of Kaduna and Katsina. The gunmen also kidnapped more than 20 others. Tise Makende reports.
Authorities say both attacks happened on Tuesday night, and among those killed is a retired soldier. The residents say some of the gunmen were dressed in military uniforms. The United Nations says more than 300 students were abducted by the gangs in Katsina State in December last year. Authorities in Kaduna State say over 300 people were killed in the state and over 800 kidnapped by the same gangs earlier this year. President Muhammadu Buhari says his government is committed to ending insecurity and has directed his security chief to destroy the remaining vestiges of terrorists and criminal gangs in the country. Tessim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
On to Guinea now, and the leader of a 2008 coup has returned to the West African country after more than a decade in exile in Burkina Faso. Musa Dadis Camara left Guinea after narrowly surviving an assassination attempt carried out by one of his own bodyguards. Camara was a little-known army captain when he seized power in December 2008 after the death of longtime dictator Lansana Conte. His brief rule was marked by a stadium massacre against peaceful demonstrators. At least 157 people were killed, according to UN figures. It remains unclear if the 57-year-old could face criminal charges. No trial has ever been held for the perpetrators of the violence. For years, Guinean government had resisted Camara's permanent return, fearing it could stoke political instability. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Omicron dashes hopes of Zimbabweans looking to return home for the Christmas holidays.
Africa is ending yet another pivotal year. From moments of uncertainty to moments of triumph, moments of unrest, moments of rapid change in business, climate change, security and diplomacy, and coming back from the brink. All these and much more on Event 2021.
Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok intends to resign. This is according to sources close to him that spoke to Reuters. They say he made the announcement to a group of national political and intellectual figures on Tuesday. Hamdok was reinstated in late November after being detained following a military coup on the 25th of October, which ended a transitional partnership with political parties. Protests have been taking place in Sudan to reject military rule while calling for a civilian-led transition. Some demonstrators have also denounced the Prime Minister's decision to return to office. According to Hamdok, that move was meant to preserve gains made during the transition process and end bloodshed. According to an independent doctors' committee in the country, 47 people have died during the unrest. The Ethiopian government says any future peace talks with the TPLF rebels will have to be centered on justice and accountability. The press secretary of the Ethiopian Prime Minister's office, Bileni Seyum, told journalists at a press briefing that urgent humanitarian assistance is being delivered to all conflict-affected areas. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more from Addis Ababa.
The Ethiopian Prime Minister's press secretary, Bileni Seyum, says humanitarian aid is now being urgently supplied to Amhara, Afar, and Tigray regions. And so far, more than 63,000 quintals of food aid have been delivered to different locations in the Amhara region. And
particularly in the Afar region, more than 1.3 million people have been identified as in need of emergency or immediate emergency response, and close to 400,000 have been displaced as a result of TPLF's incursions within 21 waradas. So the government, together with partners, has continued helping those in conflict-affected areas. In Tigray region, the most recent update that I have is that a total of 225 trucks have, as of recent, arrived into the Tigray region with humanitarian supplies that have arrived into Mekelle, and a total of around 9,300 metric tons of food and non-food items have been delivered.
When asked about the government's plan to peacefully conclude the war in the north with TPLF, Bilene said any peace talks will be centered on justice, accountability and dialogue.
The call that you made for peace is something that the Ethiopian government still wants. The resolution of this phase is something that we're committed to in terms of ensuring that it's done in a peaceful way and through a political means. Nevertheless, any political solution will always be centered on justice, will be centered on accountability, and also in dialogue. When I refer to you in terms of dialogue, the question of who and with whom this would be done with and what are the prerequisites are details that will be unveiled in due time.
The almost a year and 3 months old conflict in Ethiopia has resulted in the damage of key infrastructure and disruption of day-to-day lives in Tigray, Amhara and Afar regions. Addis Ababa is now preparing for post-conflict reconstruction.
So post-conflict reconstruction is key. There are some areas already in which initial infrastructure works are being undertaken, like restoring electric lines and phone lines that have been purposely, decimated. But over the next, there is a committee that has been set up under the purview of the Deputy Prime Minister, and over the next weeks, it will become more evident what the entire package for reconstruction of, conflict-affected communities would look like.
Ethiopia's economy in particular and the Eastern Africa region in general desperately need to see the return of peace in this nation. Any prolonged conflict, experts tell you, will only result in further loss of lives, displacement of millions and damage to public and private properties. And many are banking on the proposed all-inclusive dialogue to deliver the much-needed peace to Ethiopia. CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's go to South Africa, where scientists say that the Omicron COVID variant is less severe than other strains of the disease. This has been concluded from a study that suggests reduced risks of hospitalization and severe disease. Authors of the study say that this is likely because of high population immunity. The study is based on people who contracted the Omicron variant between October and November. Those who were affected during this time were found to be 70% less likely to develop serious sickness or be hospitalized. This is compared to those who were diagnosed with the Delta strain between April and November. Experts have been researching on the harmfulness of the latest strain as authorities race to find ways to curb its spread, and researchers work to understand it. Well, as the Omicron variant spreads across the world, governments are looking at how to curb its spread. In Zimbabwe, the government has put in place a mandatory 14-day quarantine for travelers entering the country. This is hampering holiday plans of several Zimbabweans living in South Africa.
South Africa is a second home to many Zimbabwean workers. Holiday season usually is the time they return to Zimbabwe to visit their families. But the Omicron variant is putting those plans in jeopardy. A mandatory 14-day quarantine is impacting travel plans.
I don't know how we're going to do it. If they want to quarantine as us, we're going to be quarantined. If they let us go, we're going to go. We follow the instructions.
But there are travelers like Albert who are determined to travel home. Albert hasn't seen his family in Zimbabwe since 2018. Both he and his wife have taken out loans to cover the cost of quarantine.
You can't have you can't stay maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years without seeing your parents. It was difficulties, and also you got children who are there. You see, now we see we must see them, and they must see us. You see, so that's why we decided to travel now.
It's not just travelers who are impacted. Tour operators are witnessing a significant drop in business.
Since COVID started, we don't have a business. You look as you see, it's very quiet. Even the booth, I have look, no business. This quarantine, this is COVID killing our business. So people are scared when they're going to Zimbabwe, they are getting quarantine. So no one business as usual. It's compared another years ago. This year there's no business.
Our business is very low. Customers, the passengers are not going back to Zim. And about the COVID-19, you know, they are afraid for quarantine and what is talking at the borders.
As Omicron continues to gain dominance, holiday plans remain up in the air for many. Astatal, CGTN.
And a quick look now at today's business. Here's what's coming up. Public outcry in Zimbabwe over a proposed tax on smartphones. And post-harvest wastage in Nigeria tops a worrying $8 million annually.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
There's a public outcry in Zimbabwe over a $50 tax on smartphones, which Zimbabwe's finance minister proposed in the 2022 national budget. Consumers say it will push the new indispensable gadgets out of reach. CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya has this report.
With more than 13.2 million active mobile subscriptions in the country, the latest move by Zimbabwe's finance minister is an attempt to follow the money.
You do all your transactions through your mobile device, be it it's mobile money, be it money transfer, be it any electronic transfer. You're now doing it through your mobile device. So the minister realized that this is the most valuable product that anybody can ever have. So it's the easiest product to tax.
While the move will significantly bolster government coffers, it will cost many here who rely on mobile phones as a necessity.
It's an indirect tax on an average individual, yet you know that's our means of communication. For example, schools now require you to have a mobile device in order for you to do e-learning. Companies require you to have a mobile device in order for you to work because you're working from home.
The finance minister has said the $50 tax will target mobile devices for which duty has not been paid. However, questions have been raised about how to prove duties have not been paid, especially since ICT devices were exempt from paying duty as part of efforts to speed up digital transformation. Administering the tax may add an additional layer of costs to mobile network operators who have been tasked with coming up with a registration mechanism to collect the funds.
It may also retard financial inclusion and risks leaving some communities behind.
This straight away is targeting at the informal workers and traders. And when we talk of informal workers and traders, we are also talking of some people who are operating from the rural communities. And the question is now, it means the mobile phones will be very expensive for them to access. Yet we are saying we are now in a digital world.
The government already imposes taxes on airtime and data top-ups and levies a 2% tax on all mobile money transactions. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
In Ghana, fighting broke out in parliament as lawmakers debated over a proposed tax on electronic transactions earlier in the week. The 1.75% E-levy, which includes taxes on mobile money payments, was first proposed last month. It has divided the House for weeks and has held up the passing of the national budget. Those challenging it claim it would reduce overall economic activity as it will affect lower-income people. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta argues that the levy would widen the tax net and raise an additional $1.15 billion in 2022. A vote on whether to proceed with the urgency procedure was postponed to the 18th of January next year. Nigeria's post-harvest losses have become a matter of great concern, according to international aid agency Action Aid Nigeria. The West African nation records over $8 million annually in post-harvest losses. The organization says continuous loss of agricultural produce in Nigeria will impact the entire West African region. That's because Nigeria is a key player in the food supply chain. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with the story.
Irish potatoes farmer Alex Jeremiah getting rid of potatoes that have gone bad. It's a repeated cycle for the 31-year-old, planting, harvesting and wasting. Many farmers like Alex have no access to modern storage facilities. His 2.5-hectare farmland yields up to $1,500 worth of potatoes per harvest, but he rakes in low profits from selling for less in order to reduce wastes.
In the rainy season, once you harvest, you must sell immediately. If not, it will go bad. And if you take it to the market, the middleman will cut down the prices, not minding how much the farmer has suffered to cultivate. If you harvest 40 bags, lack of storage will make you lose like 5 bags. In the rainy season, we lose more because that one has more water in it.
Nigeria's post-harvest losses have remained a major threat to food sufficiency and losses for farmers like Alex. A report by international organization Action Aid Nigeria pegged yearly post-harvest losses at about $8.5 billion. Insufficient funding remains a major factor driving the losses.
They are having less access to trainings that could also curb post-harvest losses due to low investment in extension services that is needed for them to learn how to also do some post-harvest losses savings. At Nigerian level, the proposed agriculture budget is just 1.78%. That's for 2022. And many other West African countries, they are not putting up to 10% in their annual budget.
Nigeria contributes about 51% to food supply in the West African region. That makes the short and long-term impacts of the post-harvest losses dire on Nigeria and the West African sub-region.
It means that our food import bill will keep on going high and making us to have a lot of trade deficit. And it means that we can't save our foreign exchange because the more we import, the more indirectly the naira gets devalued.
Experts recommend increased investments in storage and other post-harvest management systems.
It's time to engage science, technology, and innovation in building storage solutions, post-harvest solutions that can be homegrown. Those are the things that banks and financial institutions, venture capital should fund, because that's actually where the money is.
Experts say that reducing post-harvest losses by 20% will create more jobs and boost food security, well, not just for Nigeria, but countries in the West African region as well. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's coming up. Real Madrid